It was a sweltering afternoon in Ayutthaya, the old capital of Thailand. The sun hung heavy in the sky, casting long golden rays through the market stalls that buzzed with life. The scent of incense, fried bananas, and fresh jasmine wafted through the air. Among the chaos of voices and footsteps, there walked a man named Arun, quiet, thoughtful, and recently grieving the loss of his young son. He was not a man of superstition. A schoolteacher by trade, Arun preferred logic to legend, facts to faith. But grief, as it often does, softened the edges of his skepticism. Since the accident, his home felt hollow, and his dreams, when he could sleep, were haunted by the echoes of a child's laughter. It was in that fragile state that Arun found himself drawn to a small, nearly hidden stall at the far edge of the market. Unlike the other vendors, this one was silent. Its table was draped in deep red cloth, and a single item sat upon it, a small, golden-skinned doll with black hair, red eyes, and a faint smile carved delicately into its face. Its hands were clasped in prayer, and its robe shimmered in the light. The old woman behind the stall watched him approach without a word. Arun hesitated. "Is this a Kuman Thong?" he asked, recalling the name from old village stories. She nodded slowly. "He is waiting for someone to listen. Would you like to hear his story?" Arun gave a cautious smile. "I don't believe in that kind of thing." The woman leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Belief is not required. Respect is." There was something about her tone, not threatening, but weighted with meaning. Before he could respond, she pushed the doll forward. "No charge. He chooses you." Arun frowned. "That's not how this works." She only smiled. "Take him home. Light incense. Offer sweets. And never forget to say thank you." Against his better judgment, Arun found himself reaching for the doll. It was strangely warm to the touch. As he walked away, he didn't notice the stall behind him vanish, as though it had never existed. Arun placed the doll gently on a shelf in his living room, just above the small shrine where his late son's photograph still stood. The Kuman Thong sat silently, its gaze unchanging. At first, Arun treated it more as a cultural curiosity than anything else, a relic of folklore. But out of respect for the old woman, and perhaps a touch of guilt, he lit a stick of incense and placed a sweet banana treat in front of it. To the little guardian, he mumbled, embarrassed by the ritual. The days passed. At first, nothing happened. Life continued as usual, with its quiet moments and daily routines. Arun spent most of his time alone, reading, cooking, or correcting papers from the local school. But slowly, odd things began to occur, not frightening, but peculiar. One evening, he returned home to find his favorite pen, the one he hadn't seen in months, sitting neatly on his desk. Another morning, the gas bill, which had been overdue, showed up mysteriously marked as paid. And once, in the quiet of dawn, he swore he heard the distant sound of a child's giggle echoing softly down the hallway. Faint. Almost tender. He told himself it was just his imagination, tricks of a tired mind. But then came the dreams. In them, a small boy with golden skin and red eyes stood at the foot of his bed. The boy never spoke, only looked at him with a soft, almost sad expression. And every time Arun tried to approach him, he would vanish into smoke. The following morning, Arun began to feel something shift. His old lottery ticket, the one he always bought but never checked, had hit a modest prize. Not life-changing, but enough to take a deep breath and feel luck for the first time in years. He glanced at the doll on the shelf. It seemed to be smiling just a little more. Feeling uneasy, yet oddly grateful, Arun lit incense once again, this time whispering, "Thank you, if it was you." The house remained quiet. But from the hallway, unseen and barely audible, something whispered back. "You're welcome." The whispers became more frequent. Sometimes they drifted in while Arun was preparing his evening tea, or just as he was about to fall asleep. Soft, almost playful. As if a child were nearby, hiding behind curtains or beneath the floorboards. He told himself it was grief. Still lingering. still shaping his mind in strange ways. But something inside him, a quiet instinct, whispered that this was no longer about grief. It was about presence. The Kuman Thong now sat on a proper pedestal. Arun had cleaned the shelf, added fresh incense, small toys, and sweets every few days. He even began to greet it each morning and say goodnight before bed. At school, things improved. His difficult students began to listen more. The school principal, once distant, praised him in front of the faculty. Arun's luck was turning, and though he never said it aloud, he felt the source was sitting right there in his living room, the doll with the red eyes. But good fortune came with strange shadows. One night, as a thunderstorm rolled over Ayutthaya, Arun woke to the sound of something tapping on glass. It wasn't the rain. The blue flame burned only for a moment, but the unease it left behind lingered long after. Arun found it harder to concentrate at school. He often felt eyes on him, not from students, but from shadows in corners where no one should be. He attributed it to stress, lack of sleep, guilt. But denial was getting harder to maintain. A neighbor, Mrs. Suni, an elderly woman known for her sharp intuition and louder opinions, visited one morning, bringing over soup and unsolicited advice. As she stepped into the living room, her smile faded. She looked directly at the Kuman Thong on the shelf and froze. "Why do you have that here?" she asked, voice tight. Arun gave his usual answer: it was a gift. Harmless. More symbolic than spiritual. Mrs. Suni didn't laugh. "You feed it?" "Yes," Arun replied, almost defensively. "You shouldn't." He furrowed his brow. "Why?" "Because now it's not just a doll. It's part of your home. It listens. And one day, it will ask for more." She left the soup and refused to stay for tea. That night, Arun didn't light the incense. He didn't leave any sweets. He was tired, emotionally and physically, and told himself it could wait one day. The following morning, a student at school had an accident during his class. Nothing too serious, a fall from a chair. But it was sudden, unusual. And as Arun helped the boy up, he noticed something disturbing. A tiny red smudge on the child's wrist. Almost like a fingerprint. Small. Unmistakably small. Back home, the room felt colder. The house, quieter. Arun looked at the Kuman Thong. It hadn't moved, of course. But something was different. The red in its eyes seemed deeper. The shadows behind it, darker. He relit the incense immediately, offering 2 sweets this time. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't forget. I was just tired." From the corner of the room, something shifted. Not a sound. Just the feeling, that thick, heavy air again. And then, his phone rang. Unknown number. No caller ID. He hesitated, then answered. There was no voice. Only the sound of breathing, small, steady, childlike. And then, a whisper. "Don't forget me again." The line went dead. The days began to blur. Arun's world, once quiet and orderly, turned into a strange rhythm of appeasement. Morning incense. Afternoon sweets. Nighttime whispers. He began to speak to the Kuman Thong openly, no longer just out of ritual, but with a sense of obligation. Almost as if speaking to a living presence. And maybe he was. The more attention he gave, the more responsive it became. Doors he left closed were found ajar. Objects moved ever so slightly. Lights flickered when he walked past. He told no one. Who would believe him? But his sleep, or what was left of it, was the most unnerving part. The dreams changed. Gone was the silent child at the foot of the bed. Now, Arun wandered through endless halls, following soft footsteps that always stayed just out of reach. Sometimes he heard crying. Other times, laughter. Always a child's voice, always in the dark. He'd wake up drenched in sweat, convinced he hadn't been alone. Then came the drawings. It began when Arun found a piece of paper on his desk, a crudely drawn picture done in red ink. It showed a man standing beside a small boy with glowing eyes. The man looked frightened. He assumed it was a student's prank. But when he brought it to class the next day and asked who had left it, no one came forward. A girl in the back, usually quiet, raised her hand slowly. "Is that your son?" she asked. Arun froze. "What do you mean?" "The boy in the picture," she said softly. "He comes to school with you sometimes. I've seen him standing behind you." A silence filled the room. Later that evening, Arun lit incense again, this time with trembling hands. "You're still here, aren't you?" he asked. The flame danced once. Then, the small plastic toy he'd placed on the altar slid forward by itself, falling off the edge of the shelf and landing at his feet. He picked it up with shaking fingers. "Do you want something?" he whispered. The house was silent. But then, a knock. From inside the hallway. Not the front door. Not the windows. The hallway wall. A single knock. Then another. Tap. 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 Arun pressed his ear against the wall, heart pounding. Nothing. He backed away and looked toward the doll again. Its smile had changed. Not wider. Not deeper. Just real. The days grew quieter, but not in peace, in pressure. Arun no longer invited guests. He stopped calling friends. His world revolved around routines designed to keep the house balanced. Incense, toys, sweets. Praise. Ritual. And always, gratitude. He began researching. Forums. Old texts.